So you're very welcome back to Unstable TV. Thanks so much everyone for joining us. We do appreciate that. So of course, if this is your first time on Unstable TV, do not forget to
like, subscribe, comment, share, hit the bell, and if you're back with us again, thank you.
So a very special request came in. We had a very, very generous donation to our Patreon. I hope I am saying that right.
Patron. Hopefully we pronounce one of them right, because we don't really know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, so helping towards the channel and helping us grow, we do appreciate that. So a very big shout out to our Patreon today, Juju. And their biggest request was to react to...
It is Admiral Yi videos. We have done 2 of these before, and there is 3 videos left. And it's all about his life in the dynasty periods. So yeah, it was actually really interesting. The first 2 we watched. So let's learn some more about him.
Yep.
So yeah, if anybody else wants to join our Patreon or Patron or whichever way you pronounce it, the link is in the description below. So we are back for part 4 of Admiral Yi. And this is Admiral Yi, Those Who Seek Death Shall Live. Extra history.
Without further ado, let's jump straight into this for ourselves and you guys.
Last time, we left Yi storming through the waters south of Korea, savaging the Japanese fleet wherever he went. He had driven them first to consolidate their forces to try to thwart him, and then, finally, to give up on offensive naval operations entirely, restricting their fleets to just defending the vital supplies coming in at Busan. Now it was in this last harbor that Yi would attack them. In the 2 months since the Battle of Angulpo, Yi had trained his men, reinforced his fleet, and tried to rationalize the structure of Korean Naval Command. Now, on September 1st, 1592, he was ready to take on the combined Japanese armada at Busan. His fleet of 166 ships set out to destroy the nearly 500 Japanese ships awaiting them in Busan Bay. He caught a few stragglers along the way, but the Japanese had finally learned from their past encounters with him. They were holed up in the harbor now, and while Yi's ships were able to fire into the harbor from outside Japanese cannon range, he couldn't find an opening to get close enough to achieve the type of complete victory he craved. As long as the Japanese were in that harbor, they were protected by the surrounding troops and cannon on the shore. By the end of the day, Yi's fleet had destroyed 130 ships, and the Japanese hadn't sunk a single vessel, but the Japanese forces still held the all-important harbor of Busan. Yi had not been able to break their last line of supply. Now they'd be able to re-entrench and reinforce the harbor. As winter set in and the campaign season slowed down, the situation on the ground changed as well. An army from China had finally arrived in the north, and by January they had driven the Japanese out of Pyongyang. All over the country, the Japanese started to fall back, unable to sustain their lengthy lines of supply due to Yi's bottling up of their navy. By April, Seoul was retaken as well, and Busan served as the last great Japanese stronghold, anchoring their control on southern Korea. By August, Yi was promoted to Supreme Commander of the Korean Army and moved his base to the island of Hansando, where he had previously used his crane wing formation to crush the Japanese offensive fleet. Again and again, Yi petitioned the court for Marines so that he could resume naval operations, because his fleet couldn't attack the Japanese so long as they stayed defended under their shore guns, and without Marines, he couldn't dislodge the shore batteries in order to follow up with the naval attack. But the Korean army was still in disarray at this point. Some of the most significant military gains on land were actually being made by guerrilla forces and the righteous armies of Buddhist monks. And what little of the regular army there was not already deployed on the main offensive with the Chinese was simply not up to the task Yi needed. And so his fleet sat, patrolled the waters, and kept the Japanese from breaking out of Busan. They would not get to engage in another major battle for some time. So instead, Yi focused on turning his island base into a production center. With the country ravaged by war and most of the working-age men conscripted into the army or the navy, the central government couldn't provide Yi's forces with the food, lumber, or weapons he needed to keep his men fed and his fleet in top shape. So he invited refugees to come to his island. He would protect them if they would work the land. At first they were just producing grain, but soon they were harvesting salt and timber. Then the production facilities grew to handle boat building and uniform manufacturing. Soon there was a full-fledged R&D wing on the island, and great forges to produce goods of iron. The first truly successful Korean muskets were forged here by Yi's research team. But as Yi was making his navy self-sufficient, the land war in Korea slowly ground to a stalemate, and peace talks began. The talks wore on for 3.5 years, until in September 1596,
That's a long time.
negotiations
Yeah.
broke down, and Hideyoshi prepared a second invading force of 141,500 men to head to the shores of Korea. As this new invasion force was setting sail, the Korean court received a letter from one of the Japanese commanders, in which he appeared to be selling out one of his counterparts, telling the Koreans exactly where his hated rival's fleet would be sailing, and suggesting that if only Admiral Yi Sun-shin would sail there, he could wipe them out and do everybody a favor. Now, Admiral Yi heard this and laughed. Yeah,
Good
nice
try.
try. He refused the order to sail his fleet into an obvious Japanese trap. But Yi's childhood friend, Ryu Sung-young, had enemies in court, and when they heard of Yi's refusal to follow orders, they seized on this opportunity and had Yi tried for treason. Ryu could do nothing
that was
to
a
save
trap.
him.
Yeah.
Yi was ordered to return to Seoul for his punishment. His replacement as head of the navy would be Won Kyun. This was the guy who'd sat and done nothing when the Japanese ships first invaded, and then promptly scuttled his own fleet. A fleet 4 times as large as the one Yi had been using to inflict such heavy losses on their enemies. Yi was nearly sentenced to death for his insubordination, but there were still those in court who saw his
actually
value,
saved
and though they
Korea.
couldn't
I know.
save him entirely, they did save his life. He was once more reduced to the rank of a common soldier and sent off to fight with one of the
Wow.
armies. But not long after he arrived at the army, the Japanese tried the same trick again. They sent the court a letter, this time informing them of a large transport fleet that was on its way, and saying how easy it would be to pick off these transports if they hurried. Won Kyun was ordered to intercept this juicy target, and he immediately set
Wonder what
sail with
happened.
every ship Yi had built. But when he reached the waters near Busan, he was shocked to find not an unarmed transport convoy, but a massive war fleet of 500 ships. Despite this
comes
and
an
the
obvious
exhaustion
trouble.
his
No, no.
men faced from traveling so quickly, Won Kyun ordered a head-on assault. The winds picked up, and a gale began to form. Won Kyun couldn't keep his fleet together. Soon, some 30 Korean ships were burning, having drifted close enough to the enemy that, for the first time in the war, the Japanese could deploy their preferred form of naval warfare, boarding parties. In a panic, Won Kyun ordered a retreat and fled to the island of Kadok-Do, where he ordered his men off the ships to resupply. What he hadn't realized was that this island was under Japanese control. As his men searched for fresh water, they were set upon by the Japanese island garrison and slaughtered. Those who escaped fled back to the ships without any of the supplies they desperately needed. Then the fleet just sat there, deflated and listless. Commanders asked for orders, but Won Kyun had none. Though Busan itself was not far away, he didn't even send out scouts or reposition his fleet. Then, on the night of July 15th, guided by a full moon, the Japanese struck. Won Kyun's forces were in a disadvantageous position. His men were fatigued from lack of
realmed
supply
Admiral
and
Yi's
demoralized
fleet.
by their loss and the days of waiting. Caught off guard at night and without any sort of plan, they were no match for the organized and coordinated Japanese assault. Even abandoning ship couldn't save them, as those that made it to one of the nearby shores found themselves face to face with the Japanese army, who were silently waiting there for any stragglers who might try to escape, and were quickly cut down. Of the fleet Yi had
They were
so
everywhere
carefully
now.
built, only 12 ships escaped, saved by one of the sub-commanders who had tried to warn Won Kyun of the danger they faced. 157 Korean ships were
Wow.
lost that day, including every turtle ship ever built. So with only 12 ships left in the entire navy, who did Korea call upon?
Oh,
Who
not the
else?
turtle
But
ship.
mere days after reinstating Yi as admiral, the court informed him that they were disbanding the navy. Yi responded thusly: "This humble subject still has 12 ships. However small the number may be, I solemnly swear I will be able to defend the sea if I prepare myself for death to resist the enemy." And so they let him. So Yi plotted and pondered where he would make his last stand. This would be it. This one decision would
Flowers.
seal the fate of Korea. He studied charts and tides, and finally came to decide on Myeongyang, the Roaring Strait. This particular strait had a strong current, but unknown to the Japanese, its current had a strange property. Every 3 hours, it changed direction. It was upon this unusual current that Yi would gamble everything. On September 16th, the Japanese
What?
fleet, looking to destroy the final remnant of the Korean Navy, found Yi's scouts at the mouth of the strait. They chased the scouts into the strait, and that's when Yi fell upon them. Yi's flagship dashed into their midst, roaring cannon and tearing through Japanese timber. But his ship
Did they
fought
seriously
alone.
fall
The
for
rest
that
of his
retreat
navy,
style
possessed
again?
by fear at facing
did.
such a large force, had lagged behind. Eventually, though, seeing the havoc Yi's ship was wreaking on the enemy, they took heart. Messengers were sent from boat to boat with a mix of inspirational words, threats, and the hope of victory. And soon, the rest of Yi's tiny armada dove into the fray. Then, a stroke of luck. The enemy flagship was blown apart by friendly fire, and the Japanese began to waver. Some of their ships began to turn about to fall back, and it was just at this moment that the water's current turned. The strait was too narrow for all the Japanese ships to maneuver around each other, and with the current roaring against them, ship slammed into ship. They tried in vain to retreat, tangled, ships smashing into one another, screams and chaos,
Wow.
and over it all, the roaring water. With the current now on their side, the Koreans gave chase, laying into enemy ships on either side, a hail of fire and arrows. The Japanese boats burnt and sank. 133 vessels had come to crush this tiny remnant of Korean Navy, and 31 of them wouldn't be returning. Yi, even when facing odds of 10-1, had once again not lost a single ship. Word of Yi's victory spread. As his tiny fleet sailed, one by one, other ships began to show
That's
up.
crazy.
Ships that had been thought lost. Ships that had
Jesus.
been hiding after the previous disaster under Wonkyun. These ships now came to join Yi's tiny armada. Refugees flocked to where Yi's ships were anchored, willingly giving him food, cloth, and iron. And perhaps most importantly, the Chinese, who had mostly limited their naval efforts to guarding ports until now, decided that they could work with the Korean Navy and take the offensive. And so we'll leave Yi rebuilding the Korean Navy until next week, when we see the Japanese invasion ended for good.
Again.
That's
just, the story gets wilder and wilder.
I
every
love this
time.
story.
Yeah.
I actually do. It's like the underdog, but underdog plenty of times.
Yeah, like, was that not, as far as I can remember anyway, that's the second time that they basically kicked him out and put him down to just being a foot soldier again.
Yeah.
That was the second time that happened to him. And they were like, actually, we made a mistake here, come back.
Yeah.
Come here, please help us.
First off, a very big shout out to the original content creator. Make sure you check them out, give them a like, subscribe, and share. Yi, again, coming back. I love his comeback though. He literally went, studied the charts, got the currents right, and then of course he got the Japanese again, except this time with scout ships to retreat, and got them again with that. And then, literally, when they all tried to scurry away, crashed into each other. Like, not only was he undergunned and undermanned, he also used the elements against them. Like, if that's not an amazing strategist, I don't know what is.
That was an absolute genius move though. You know, one that mightn't have worked, but I suppose they didn't really have anything else to use with only 12 ships against 130 of them. He kind of had to just go with what he thought was strongest, and it was literally, like you said, using the currents against them, because, you know, you're going down that river, you're not going to assume that the current is going to change course.
No, that'd be the last thing you'd be thinking
Yeah,
about.
exactly. So that was just, I've never heard of anything happening like that before, you.
No.
I didn't know the currents could change like that, so.
Like, I mean, that's genius, because he basically got the Japanese on their, they were basically too high on a win. So their morale was too high for their ego to come down a bit.
Yeah.
So we knew that they were like, we have them all outnumbered, we're going to get them. And with that alone, so we used the elements plus the morale boost they had against them. Imagine using the victory they had against them while he's in a major loss. Well, he didn't cause the loss.
No.
But he's, like, it seems the spirit never gets crushed. He just keeps coming back. Like,
Yeah.
that's the true strength of a Korean right there. So, we'll see you all in part 5. Thanks for joining us on this one. And shout out to Juju again. And as always, you were beautiful people of YouTube. And we have been Unstable TV. That has been our 2 cents.